Okay. Thank you all for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're watching. If you can hear me, if everything sounds okay, just let me know in the comments. And we'll get going. Okay. Got the thumbs up. Got the stamp of approval from everyone. So let's get this going. This is day 6 of the January 6th committee hearings. We weren't supposed to have a hearing today, but I guess this surprise emergency hearing was called yesterday afternoon. So with less than 24 hours notice, we weren't supposed to hear anything from the January 6th committee until July. So this was called again with like a moment's notice, and it was because there were witnesses that we had to hear from that had important information. Reporting has just come out that we now know who those witnesses are going to be, or we now know who one of the witnesses is going to be. It's going to be a woman named Cassidy Hutchinson. She's an aide to Trump's then chief of staff, Mark Meadows, who himself has become, one of the most prominent figures in this entire investigation. We've seen text messages from Mark Meadows' phone, obviously on the actual day of the insurrection. We know that members of the Republican caucus, we know that Fox News hosts, we even know that Don Jr. had all texted Mark Meadows seeking to get Meadows to talk to Trump to call the whole insurrection off. That's obviously significant in its own right because it proves that these people who would go out publicly and say, oh, we think this was Antifa, we think this was a false flag, we think this was the FBI, that in reality those people knew that Donald Trump was responsible. Otherwise, if Trump wasn't responsible, why were all of those people behind the scenes in private text messages so hell-bent on trying to get Mark Meadows to talk to Trump to call it off? If it was Antifa, why would Antifa take their orders from Trump? So, of course, these people all behind the scenes knew that Trump was responsible. Mark Meadows was very, very, very often the pass-through guy, the guy who all of these people sought to connect with while they were attempting to actually get to Trump. So Mark Meadows has proven extremely useful in all of this, but he still refused to appear. The committee had held him in contempt. But Cassidy Hutchinson, one of his aides, is appearing, and so she seems like she's going to be more important in all of this in terms of understanding Meadows' role in all of this. She was always in the room, though, which is, obviously one of the key factors in terms of the committee bringing her in. And she's been featured in video clips prior to this, and yet, this will be the first time that she's appearing in person. She's testified for roughly 20 to 25 hours already for the committee. So again, a very prominent role in all of this she's taken. Today we're hearing from the January 6th committee that it would present, quote, recently obtained evidence and receive witness testimony. So a little bit of a muted response from the committee in terms of what we should expect. But I think just the fact that they called this committee hearing out of nowhere when we weren't supposed to hear anything for a couple of weeks is telling in its own right. So that's what we should hear from Cassidy Hutchinson. Again, for the people who've just joined, Cassidy Hutchinson is expected to appear today. That's an aide to Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows. Someone who, up to now, has already been one of the most useful figures in this investigation, according to the January 6th committee. Norm Eisen, who I'm sure many of you follow on Twitter, said Cassidy Hutchinson might turn out to be the next John Dean. I'd be cautious of setting expectations too high. Obviously, we've been in a similar position before where we've seen outright proof of criminality, and there's a difference these days in terms of what people are willing to accept, the degree of criminality that people are willing to accept if the person committing that criminality is on their own team. So I would just proceed with caution. Also, one other interesting point about Cassidy Hutchinson is that she testified that she was involved in conversations with Matt Gaetz, Mo Brooks, Andy Biggs, Louis Gohmert, and Scott Perry, all of whom had sought pardons from the White House, because that's how you know they're innocent, because all of them sought pardons from the White House. This is why when all of them go out on Fox News and OAN and Newsmax and they log into their little Twitter accounts and tweet about how this is all a hoax and there's no proof of any wrongdoing, and yet all of these guys had all sought pardons because Jamie Raskin himself calls it declarations of consciousness of guilt. These people all knew what they were doing, and yet they did it anyway because their intent was not to tell the truth about anything. It wasn't to uncover nefarious behavior or instances of fraud that the lamestream media is not covering. It's because they knew that what they were doing was illegal. That's it. This isn't rocket science here. If you request a pardon, it's probably because you've broken the law. So the fact that we've heard in these last hearings that Gaetz, Brooks, Biggs, Gohmert, Scott Perry, we even heard an indication that Marjorie Taylor Greene had requested one. Although the wording was a little iffy on that, so I'm not 100% sure on that one. But in any case, all of these people knew exactly what they were doing. They were seeking to break the law and give themselves cover for having done it. So we'll hear from Cassidy Hutchinson today. I do want to go over, by the way, it's 9 o'clock Pacific, noon Eastern. We have about an hour until this hearing begins. So this hearing will begin in 1 hour. I'll do my pre-show until then. So that's where we're at right now. This will start at 10 a.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And by the way, you can throw questions in there. I'm going to do a brief overview of what we found out from previous hearings, and I think important things that we should be remembering. But in the meantime, if you do have questions, throw them in the chat there, and I'll try to answer them so that I'm not just talking at you for an hour here. And while I'm waiting for those questions, I should take this moment. If you're not yet subscribed to my channel, if you could please subscribe. That is the best way to support what I do. I'll host these live streams for all of the January 6th committee hearings. So to be notified when we have a hearing come up, just subscribe to my channel. It's free, doesn't cost you anything, but this way you'll get an alert when I go live for these hearings now and in the future. And we'll have a number of others coming up in July, unless what happens today happens again, in which they just call a committee hearing with a moment's notice. Oh, somebody just brought up a good point. Requests for pardons are a consciousness of guilt. Requests for pardons are consciousness of guilt. Acceptance of a pardon is an admission of guilt. So if these people sought pardons, and again, we don't know who's accepted these pardons because we just don't know who's accepted them yet, if they were even given. You would assume that the people who are pleading the Fifth don't have pardons, because pleading the Fifth allows you to not speak so as to self-incriminate. And if you have a pardon, you're not able to incriminate yourself anyway. So anybody who is speaking to the committee likely doesn't. Will the DOJ even do anything about this? What are your thoughts? I have to think that the DOJ is seeking this stuff, because we've already heard them request information from people about Donald Trump. So clearly, they're circling this drain, and I think they've reached the point where they're trying to get to him. I also think that this January 6th committee hearing schedule is important to them too, because this ramps up the pressure on the DOJ, because everybody knows that the January 6th committee itself can't charge anybody, can't indict anybody, but the DOJ can. And so this investigation that would be happening just among the DOJ officials, like behind the scenes, is happening in public concurrently. And so whereas the DOJ would be able to operate with very little pressure, relatively speaking, because we wouldn't know what's happening, we wouldn't know all of these 1,000 people they've spoken with, we wouldn't have any insight into the tens of thousands of documents that the January 6th committee has had access to. Now, because of this committee, we do. And so all of this pressure that the DOJ wouldn't be under, because it would all have been done in private, basically, is happening in public. And so that allows people to push Merrick Garland, to push the DOJ to actually do something about what we all know is outright criminality, about Donald Trump's actions, which we know were done with criminal intent, because we know that he was told behind the scenes by people like Bill Barr, by people like Alex Cannon, by even his own daughter, Ivanka, admitted that there was no fraud. And yet somebody like Trump would go out and repeat these fraud claims anyway, because he knew what he was doing was A, had corrupt intent, and B, was just done with the sole purpose of defrauding the very people he was speaking with. So I have to think that the DOJ will do something about this. I mean, we can't go into this. I mean, look, we can't go into this with such a defeatist attitude. I think we all have some degree of a defeatist attitude because we've lived through the Trump era, and it's very hard to see any accountability for these people clearly. But I think that, we have to hope that something's going to be done about everything that we're seeing. So until I'm proven otherwise, all I can do is hold out hope that the DOJ is going to see all of this, see the criminal intent that Trump operated with, see all the criminality that he and his foot soldiers operated with, and that they'll do something about it. In your opinion, what single video clip of the existing hearings is most damning for the conspirators? I think that the most damning video clip is from the first day, where we have someone like Bill Barr who came out and said that he told Trump that his claims of fraud were bullshit. It was also someone like Hirschman, the White House counsel, speaking with Pence's team, and saying that they wouldn't be able to do this John Eastman scheme, and so the Pence team knew that, and when they spoke with somebody from the Trump side and told them that, Trump went out and said that Pence was able to do this anyway. So I think those two clips were especially damning. Anything with Hirschman and anything with Hirschman speaking with Pence's team and Trump's team, and also Bill Barr just calling Trump's whole election fraud scheme bullshit. I think that's important because it proves that Trump was told beforehand, like I just said, he was told beforehand the truth and yet opted to ignore it, because his goal in all of this wasn't to actually let his supporters know that there was fraud, because there wasn't, and we know that there wasn't because he was just told it. It was to defraud them. And so not only did he defraud them, but he did it with corrupt intent because he was already told the truth. He knew the truth. He was told the truth by Bill Barr. Bill Barr, by the way, who is no hero in all of this, but even if that guy, somebody who completely misrepresented the Mueller report, for example, came out and gave his summary about the Mueller report that bared no resemblance to the actual Mueller report, if someone like that, someone who is such a willing and able foot soldier for Donald Trump, would come forward and tell him that there was no, that all of his claims of fraud were bullshit, all of his claims of fraud were bullshit. Oh, so somebody had brought up Rudy getting attacked, getting brutally assaulted. I'm not sure if anybody's seen that clip of Rudy Giuliani getting brutally assaulted. It was frankly hard for me to watch someone at that age take a beating quite like he did. I'm kidding. What actually happened with Rudy Giuliani is somebody came by him, gave him a pat on the back, said something. We can't hear that part in the video, but I mean, it's a pat on the back. Rudy went on, I mean, the like the equivalent of like showing up the next day in a wheelchair and a neck brace. The guy took a pat on the back. You've taken harder hits if someone like accidentally bumped into you at the supermarket or online to pay for something. He walked out and he was doing interviews where he said that he was that it was excruciating pain, that he felt like he got hit by a boulder. A boulder. I mean, somebody patted him on the back. And look, I'll never advocate for you can't touch another person. It's still probably assault. Just don't touch other people, especially if you don't like them. But for him to have claimed that he got struck by a boulder, I mean, it just goes to show like the extent to which these people traffic in bullshit. And he had the upper hand. All he had to say was like, someone touched me. I didn't want him to touch me. It probably qualifies as assault. The guy got arrested. Don't touch me. And he would have looked fine. But to go on this like pity tour on Newsmax and podcasts, wherever else he was, crying about how he felt like he got struck with the force of 10,000 buildings. Oh my God, Rudy, give it a rest. It's like his own personal 9/11 besides 9/11. I think that was actually the last short that I posted on my channel. So if you haven't seen that clip yet, just go to my channel and scroll down from the homepage onto shorts. It's the most recent short that I posted was it's like a 45-second clip of Rudy. And I've told this story before. Rudy was like, I grew up in New Jersey. My whole family is from New York. Rudy was like one of my heroes when I was growing up. I had a signed photo of Rudy Giuliani and Yankees manager Joe Torre on my wall. Like, for me to have a signed picture of Rudy Giuliani on my childhood bedroom wall goes to show the fall from grace this guy's had. The guy was one of my heroes. I wanted Giuliani to run for president so bad. I thought he was great. I mean, from a kid from Jersey whose whole family's from New York, and then like growing up living in Jersey after 9/11, to have like seen Rudy at his prime, just kind of highlights the dichotomy between what we're seeing right now and then. And it's sad. It's really sad what Rudy's become, coming from someone who thought he was like a hero back then. So for me to say that, somebody for whom he started at like the top, goes to show like what a fall he's taken. And it is sad, but that's what happens in the Republican Party. If you want to succeed, you have one option, and that's to have sycophantic devotion to Donald Trump, and that's it. And if you don't, you're not going to get through a primary. You're not going to get the adulation that you so need from Fox News and Newsmax and OAN and like Dan Bongino. Those are the gatekeepers on the right now. That's right. I forgot that. He said he thought he'd been shot with a gun. Like, the guy got patted on the back. And again, he's in the right, because like you just can't touch somebody else. And if you do pat somebody in the back, no matter how hard it is, it's probably still assault. But like, to go out there with like the world's tiniest violin and whine about how you feel like you've been shot in the back with a gun. It's just wild. Let me see if I can show this clip. I'm not very good at this stuff, but let me see if I could figure out. Let me get this Giuliani clip.
Republicans running in the primary for governor here, the Republican side, is former Trump aide Andrew Giuliani, the son of former Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani, who had his law license suspended for trying to steal the election. Giuliani also told the New York Times that he was left with, quote, red marks on his back, but was not bleeding. He told his Facebook audience the physical assault was extremely painful.
I got hit on the back.
Okay, so watch this first, then they'll show the assault.
It knocked me forward a step or two. It didn't knock me down, but it hurt tremendously.
Again, that was how Giuliani described it, and then the grocery store released the actual footage of the alleged assault. This is what it showed. There is Rudy standing right there in the middle with his back to us, looking away from the camera. Then out of nowhere, what? Wait, that's it? That's what felt like a boulder, a gunshot? Let's take another look in slow motion. Rudy standing there, he's talking, and then somebody slaps him on the back. The two men appear to exchange words, and that's it. That was the assault, as Rudy tells it.
That's it, folks. That's the whole thing, the whole assault. So, yeah. And look, again, for the umpteenth time, because I know that there's going to be people who's say otherwise. You just can't touch another person, and that's fine. And I think we all accept that. But for him to go on this media tour, again, is just kind of the peak of like. And also, this is a party who wails on an endless loop about how like they're the alphas, about how they know what a real man is, and how Democrats can't even define what a woman is. And meanwhile, somebody taps this guy in the back, and he's like, "A boulder's hit me. I've been shot with 4 AR-15s." Okay, let me get rid of this here. So that's the Rudy Giuliani saga. I'd have expected nothing less from Rudy Giuliani. I guess we just should be happy at least that his head wasn't melting now that he's gotten that under control. So, with that said, we've got less than 45 minutes until this hearing begins. Again, for those of you just joining in, today we'll hear from Cassidy Hutchinson. That is the aide to Mark Meadows. That's I believe one of the only witnesses, these surprise witnesses that are being brought forward today. Whatever information she has or she's willing to share with the January 6th committee is important enough that they scheduled this hearing with a moment's notice, and they said that today's hearing would, quote, present recently obtained evidence and we'd receive witness testimony. So whatever this new evidence is clearly important enough to bring this entire thing forward. Again, Cassidy Hutchinson was also involved with conversations about requests for pardons from Matt Gaetz, Mo Brooks, Andy Biggs, Louis Gohmert, and Scott Perry. So, if she's speaking to all of these people who themselves had a hand in all of this illegal activity to the point where they felt like it was a necessity to request pardons, she's clearly a central figure in all of this. I also do want to take a moment to speak about Roe before we get into the January 6th committee hearings. We expected the Supreme Court to overturn Roe, and they've just done it this past Friday, which I fully expected on that Friday because they added an extra day that week, an extra decision day. It's also a Friday, so they get to, skirt out for the weekend. Somebody just asked if I could turn up the volume. So I fully expected that to happen this past Friday. Here's what I would say. I would say the first thing is, and I've spoken about this on my videos, so I do apologize if you've heard this before, but I think the important thing here is to normalize the idea of expanding the court, because a lot of people try to, especially the right now that they have a 6-3 majority on the court, a 6-3 extremist majority on the court, they'll say, you can't touch the Supreme Court because it's apolitical. It's an apolitical institution, and the Supreme Court is sacrosanct, and it's above politics. The people who are sitting on the Supreme Court right now are not above politics. They are political operatives. I dare you to put Clarence Thomas up against any hack Republican in Congress, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, and tell me that Clarence Thomas is any less partisan or extreme than any of those people. Of course he's not. He is just as partisan, just as much of a political operative, along with Amy Coney Barrett, along with Neil Gorsuch, as any other member, as Samuel Alito, as any other member on the court. And so, I think we have to get this idea out of our head that we can't expand the court because that's extreme. That would be an extreme reaction to what we're seeing right now, when in reality, the extreme reaction is what's happening right in front of us. Democrats so often are like, well, we can't eliminate the filibuster because then imagine what can happen in the future. Imagine what Republicans might do if they have that power. But nothing is worse than what's happening right in front of us. Like, what are Republicans going to do? Eliminate the right to abortions in the United States? They've already done it. What are Republicans going to do? Deny the impacts of climate change? They've already done it. What are Republicans going to do? Try to pass permitless carry and allow for guns everywhere for everybody 18 and up in the entire country, regardless of background or mental illness? They've already done it. All of the extreme things that we're so worried about Republicans doing, they've already done. So at this point, we can either take extreme action and confront them because they know we won't, so we do it and actually confront them and try to stop them in their tracks, or do nothing and allow these things that are extreme in and of themselves to continue to stand. So I think, like, when we're so worried about expanding the court, because then we have Republicans who come out and say, oh, you want to expand the court now? Just wait until we take power. And give yourselves what? A majority that's going to do exactly what's happening right now? At least we'd have a fighting chance if we expanded the court and got more justices on so that we can, for example, pass the Women's Health Protection Act, codifying Roe. Because right now, like, I know, here's what needs to happen. We need to hold the House. We need to add 2 Democratic senators. Once we have 2 more Democratic senators, we can eliminate the filibuster, and that means we can pass legislation with a workable majority. A simple majority, 50 votes plus 1. We have that right now, but we have 2 senators who won't eliminate the filibuster. We have Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. And so if we have 2 more Democratic senators, we can pass this legislation. Great. But then we're confronted with the issue of the court. And if we pass a law codifying Roe, the Supreme Court won't allow it to stand. So the end of the story can't be just passing legislation. The end of the story can't just be getting 2 more senators, and then passing this legislation being like, we've done it, because we haven't. What needs to happen after that is that we actually expand the court so that so much of what we're able to pass with our newly governable majority is able to actually stand. Because don't doubt for a second that if we pass the Women's Health Protection Act and codify Roe into law, that this Supreme Court will not find a way to twist themselves into pretzels to strike down that law. They've already alluded to the fact that they believe that these I don't even want to call them fetuses, embryos, that unborn, what they're calling the unborn, which are not viable humans, but the unborn have personhood, are conferred with personhood. And so if they have personhood, they'll allow a national law banning abortion to stand, but they won't allow a federal law, they won't allow statute protecting a woman's right to an abortion to stand. So they will allow one. If Republicans take control and they pass a law banning abortion nationwide, which is the ultimate goal in all of this, that's what they'll do when they have a Democratic House, Senate, and President. They'll allow that to stand because they believe that the unborn have personhood. But if we have full majorities in the House, Senate, and the presidency, and we pass a law codifying Roe, codifying a right to a safe and legal abortion in the U.S., they will strike that down. So the answer here has to be that we normalize and push for expanding the court. This idea that we have to respect tradition, there is no tradition in all of this. There is no precedent in all of this because it's been undone by the right every chance they've gotten. That part is over. Even the number 9 on the Supreme Court is not sacrosanct. Mitch McConnell himself changed the makeup of the court from 8 to 9 while he was holding Merrick Garland's seat open for an entire year. So this isn't the first time, even within the last couple of years, that the number of justices on the Supreme Court has changed. By the way, it's not in the Constitution, it's not in statute. That number has changed in the past. It's gone up and down, and it's also been equal to the number of circuit courts. So in 1869, Congress set the number of Supreme Court justices to 9 to align with the fact that we had 9 circuit courts. There are now 13 circuit courts, which would suggest that the reasonable thing to do here is to elevate the number of Supreme Court justices to 13. And again, there are people that are going to be like, oh, that's radical. What the Democrats are doing is radical. They're undermining all of our institutions, which, by the way, is rich in and of itself because we are in the middle of January 6th hearings where the president of the United States incited a coup because he didn't want to accept the results of a free and fair election. So spare me on this idea that Democrats are undermining institutions. But regardless of that, you know, we've seen this before in terms of the number of justices on the court changing. And again, this is not because Democrats have sought to just bend the will of the court to their favor. This is because this is in response to what the Republicans have already done, which is to undermine 50 years of precedent. And so I think that the only solution here is to actually to wake up and start fighting for our side, because I think what the right has seen is that Democrats won't, and they fully expect them not to, and so they can go as far right as they can humanly go, knowing full well that they're going to get an impotent response from the left. So I think if we can undo them of this notion that Democrats won't fight back, it's going to prevent them from being so bold in kind of stripping us of all of our rights. So anyway, that's my spiel about the Supreme Court and the importance of not only expanding the court, but normalize this idea of expanding the court and recognizing that when they inevitably come forward and say that Democrats are being extreme by bringing up the idea of expanding the court, we point to the fact that what's extreme is what's happening right this very second. And there are 70% of Americans who agree with Roe. There's also 50 years of precedent in terms of agreeing with the foundations of Roe. Other Supreme Court justices, it's been upheld what Justice Kavanaugh himself called precedent upon precedent. So this is as close to super precedent as you can get. All of these decisions were built upon this idea that women have a right to a safe and legal abortion in this country. So there is no sanctity in what the Supreme Court is doing here. They're making it up as they go. They are political operatives. There's no listening to precedent or settled law, just like all of them said in their confirmation hearings, crowing about how they would respect precedent. They haven't. I think that's extreme, and the only way to rebalance what is a far-right extremist court is to add seats to this court. Somebody had asked, why no term limits in the House and Senate? Because the people who would have to implement those term limits are the people with that power. And if there's one thing that we've grown to learn, it's that people who have power very rarely want to give it up. And I think we've seen that in all too much detail over these last few months, years. Also, somebody had asked, does anyone doubt that Republicans would expand the court next time they're in control? I think that if Democrats did, I think Republicans would have no qualms about expanding the court. Republicans will always fight back, but I think what we shouldn't do is be afraid that they might fight back, and so kind of neuter ourselves right at the top. I think that would be the more dangerous thing. The people who say, well, we can't do it because then they'll turn around and do something even worse. That is, I think, the worst thing that we could do in terms of protecting ourselves and protecting our own rights, because it gives them carte blanche to take extreme actions, knowing that if there's enough people on the left who are too scared to reciprocate because of some untold thing that might happen at some untold point in the future, then it's just giving them carte blanche to do whatever they want to do, knowing that they could just scare us with murky threats in the future about what they may or may not do. So I think the Democrats have to realize, like, if Republicans are going to fight, we fight back harder. And we do so to protect something that's actually virtuous, which in this case is the right to a safe and legal abortion in the United States. 70% of Americans support Roe. 70% of Americans support Roe. Also, 50 years of Supreme Court precedent supports Roe. And so these people who are saying, well, these people are just reading the letter of the law, they're just umpires calling balls and strikes. They're not, because we already know that the Supreme Court, that these justices who are ostensibly at the same level as them, they're all Supreme Court justices, have already said that Roe is established precedent, established law, that it's good law, that it was correctly decided. So if you really believe in, like, the sanctity of the court, that doesn't just start with Kavanaugh, Alito, Clarence Thomas, Neil Gorsuch, and Amy Coney Barrett. There are already Supreme Court justices who held the same position as all of these justices, who said that it was good law, who said that this case was correctly decided. So if you're really, like, if you're gonna pretend that like the Supreme Court, that what they say is sacrosanct, that like that you can't undermine what the Supreme Court has said, is that going to start today, or have you had respect for the Supreme Court for as long as they've been saying that Roe is good law? Because if it's that, then again, you can't start with just what Clarence Thomas has said. Otherwise, you're just cherry picking for some ruling that you wanted. Okay, we have a half hour until this hearing begins. We have a half hour until this hearing begins. For anybody new just tuning in, if you've not yet subscribed to my channel, please throw me a subscribe. That is the best way to support me. I'll do these live streams for every hearing. This one came out of nowhere yesterday, but I'll continue to do these live streams for every January 6th committee hearing. I know we have several more coming up in July, so if you want to be alerted when we have these hearings in the future, next month, throw me a subscribe and watch along with me as we do these live streams for these hearings. I would say too, if you are, just like a quick aside, I'm not going to spend any time on this, but if you are looking to help the progressive ecosystem, it does help to subscribe and drive engagement to progressive channels. I think the reason that I started doing this on YouTube is because I would log on and all I would see was right-wing content. And I'm like, there is this huge vacuum of left-wing content. I think back when I started doing this, there was like, Pacman did a little bit of it, TYT did a little, Kyle Kalinske, and that's pretty much all I saw. But there were a ton of right-wingers. There were the Ben Shapiros and like just Tommy Lahren, I think, was on YouTube. But in any case, there was this huge vacuum where even I was getting served right-wing content. So now I think what we can do, we have so many more progressive outlets on the left. We have the ones that I just named. We have Crooked Media. We have Midas Touch. We have, of course, Pacman and Kalinske. We have Crystal Ball. So there are a lot of great people coming up on the left. I think it's important to drive engagement and drive subscribership. So even if you don't watch all of these channels, just by virtue of subscribing, it'll elevate the progressive channels and kind of help in our fight to reach more people against a conservative media ecosystem that does really well and that reaches a lot of people. Like I said, like when I first got onto YouTube, I was getting served all of that content. So Sam Cedar as well, somebody just reminded me. So I think that's important, is like to support all of these progressive outlets and these progressive independent creators, because it'll help kind of as people continue to log on to YouTube and search for content and kind of create their political identity, is to continue to support those people. So that's just my spiel. Do you feel guilted yet into subscribing to my channel? That wasn't the goal. That wasn't the intention here. Some people are pointing out others. Jesse Dollamore, again, Midas Touch, Politics Girl, Vosh, Hassan, Majority Report. And it's great reading all these. Glenn Kirshner, my good friend Glenn Kirshner, who's awesome. That's Glenn. Beau of the Fifth Column. Pacman, of course. So yeah, Ring of Fire, Humanist Report, Rational National. So in any case, there are a lot of people coming up and kind of, Roland Martin, good point. I'm gonna forget some, but the fact is that there are a lot. So support these people, because these people are all doing good work in terms of kind of prying people away from a right-wing media ecosystem. Has been really effective, especially in terms of getting young people. I don't have TV, I don't have cable, so I get my news from the internet. And so when I go on and I'm served content from right-wing sources, that's me, somebody whose algorithm probably doesn't lend itself to watching a lot of right-wing content. So if that's me, just imagine what people who don't have like a lot of this, they're an algorithm that pushes them toward left-wing content. Imagine what they're getting served. So anyway, do what you can to support progressive media. Mary Trump, Texas Paul, Ben Dixon. So there are a lot. In any case, I'm glad that people are bringing these up. Check out the comments, find a couple of those people, subscribe to their stuff, like some of their videos, and give them a watch. And let's fix the algorithms so they point toward progressive stuff just a little bit more. Give them a little bit more engagement. Show them some love. Help the next, innocent bystander who meanders onto YouTube from the great swing state of Pennsylvania, who may be watching a Ben Shapiro video or maybe served another video because enough of you gave engagement to progressive media. This is just me heaping on the Jewish guilt right now. This is what it feels like. Now, congratulations, you know what it's like to have grown up in my house. Okay, for people just joining, again, people have been asking who is the witness today. It's going to be Cassidy Hutchinson. That is an aide to Trump's then Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows. She's become one of the most useful witnesses in terms of this committee so far. I believe she's spoken to this committee around 25 hours so far. She's especially important because Mark Meadows himself refused to appear. He was held in contempt. But Hutchinson, as one of his close aides who was always there, is able to kind of draw a picture of the scope of Meadows' actions in terms of his involvement in January 6th. This is from the Washington Post. Washington Post said that Brendan Buck, who had been an aide to Paul Ryan, said Hutchinson, quote, was always by Meadows' side. When there were meetings you'd expect principal level or very small senior staff level, he would always insist that she was in the room. So again, she's going to be not a high level aide, but we'll have we'll have the insight of one because she was always there. Like this guy said, like Brendan Buck said, it would be principal level or senior staff level, and yet she was always there. So even though she wasn't a senior staff member, she'll be important in terms of kind of explaining what happened anyway. He went on to say that it's just unusual to have relatively junior aide to be either in principal level or senior staff level, but it was his call, so we deferred to him. She was in every single meeting. That will prove important. And again, I mentioned this before, but she was involved in conversations about requests from Matt Gaetz, Mo Brooks, Andy Biggs, Louis Gohmert, and Scott Perry, all of whom sought pardons. So again, she was right in the middle of all of this stuff. And for all of these people seeking pardons, I think especially important because, like we mentioned before, it shows consciousness of guilt. Again, if they accept the pardons, that would be an admission of guilt, and that was a Supreme Court ruling too. That was the Supreme Court ruling until it's not. So we'll see what the Supreme Court does with that. Of course, we already have like Clarence Thomas, who indicated in a concurrent brief that he would revisit other decisions related to privacy. So decisions having to do with same-sex marriage and whatnot. So again, if that isn't a 5-alarm fire, I've had gay friends call me and ask outright, like people who aren't paying attention to politics, who don't pay attention to politics so closely, who ask, are we still able to be married? Or like if we go into Alabama or Georgia or Mississippi, are we still married? So, I mean, this impacts real people. They don't know what's going on. I hope what happens is that people recognize like the 5-alarm fire that is this decision and the threats that are subsequent decisions, and they turn that into action, because right now the only way, the one way we win this, the only way we win this is if people turn out in November, especially in these swing states, deliver 2 more senators and hold the House. That's it. If we're able to hold the House, we can repass so much of this legislation, like the Women's Health Protection Act. And then if we have 2 more senators, we can eliminate the filibuster, because right now the filibuster says that we need 60. We need to overcome that 60 vote threshold, that 60 vote hurdle. When we eliminate the filibuster, it becomes 50 plus 1. So to be able to pass any of these protections and codify a bunch of these rights into law, and then expand the court so that we can have a court that would actually protect these rights instead of just doing the bidding of the far-right forces in the Republican Party, all of that has to happen. But it starts quite simply with just turning out to vote in November. I think that's going to be the most important thing. And the fact is that if the same amount of people who voted in 2020 turn out in 2022, we win. It's as simple as that. We won all these states. We won Pennsylvania. We won Wisconsin. That's 2 votes, right? That's 2 senators right there. Vote out Ron Johnson and vote out any replacement to Pat Toomey, who would be Dr. Oz. Right there, we would have Fetterman, and I'm not sure if Wisconsin's had its primary yet. I don't know if it's going to be Mandela Barnes. Actually, let me know in the comments if Wisconsin has had it in. Somebody had asked why hasn't Roe been codified already, and that is a good question. There wasn't a pro-choice majority in either house, in either party rather, prior to this. This is the first time that we have a fully pro-choice majority. The last time Democrats had any semblance of a majority in Congress, they had a bunch of conservative Democrats who weren't pro-choice, and so they couldn't codify it. I know that Obama, there's the clip going around of Obama saying that it would be his top priority to codify Roe into law, but Obama can't pass the legislation. He can advocate for it, and I believe he did, but in terms of getting these conservative Democrats who are pro-life, who have since been voted out of office, who are pro-life to support these things, they didn't, and he can't. There's a limit to what. I mean, he has his bully pulpit, but a president can't just make some of these pro-life senators support pro-choice legislation. So, with that said, it should have been codified already. We've had large majorities. It should have been a priority. It wasn't, and that's it. So, we work with with the hand that we're dealt right now. I can't speak to that. I can't speak to what happened in the past. I didn't even do what I'm doing now in the past, so it's hard for me to know exactly what's happened back then. But all I do know is that right now we have a very clear game plan in front of us in terms of how to protect a woman's right to a safe and legal abortion in the United States, and it's just this November turning out to vote so that we get 2 more Democratic senators, eliminate the filibuster, pass these laws, and expand the court. It's a lot to do, and a lot has to go right, but if we're focused, if people are engaged, if there's high turnout, we can do it. With that said, there's also some other creative ideas that I've seen pop up, and those include opening abortion clinics on federal lands, at federal courthouses in these states that have abortion bans. I don't know if that's legal. There's creating abortion clinics on Native American land. Again, I don't know if that's legal. Of course, the FDA and the DOJ have just reaffirmed the abortion medication, and there's no way that states, right now, they've reaffirmed the fact that states can't undermine the ability for that medication to be sent out. So a lot of questions right now. Obviously, we're just in the heart of it. So we'll see what happens. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of litigation at both the state and federal level. Litigation that happens at the federal level worries me because, again, we have a Supreme Court that will twist itself into pretzels to, get the outcome that they want. So I'm trying to read your questions here. If Beto beats Abbott, could he reverse the new regulations in Texas? If there's such a favorable environment in Texas that Beto wins, that would probably mean that that the state house or state senate would be flipped as well. And so if they pass new legislation that would protect a woman's right to an abortion, then yeah, he could reverse that. If Beto won and he has Republican majorities, he can't create legislation. He would just be able to sign it into law. But again, if the environment is so favorable that Beto wins, depending on what their gerrymandered districts look like, I mean, they could put forward new legislation and Beto could sign it. How do we get them impeached? So Stacey had asked, how do we get them impeached? I'm less interested in the impeachment argument, not because I don't think it's the right thing to do, but if I'm not mistaken, we need 2/3 of Congress to support an impeachment. That won't happen in this environment, but I still don't think that's a reason not to do it. I think you do it because it's the right thing to do. But practically speaking, I think it would be more doable as opposed to getting 2/3 of Congress, is just to hold the House, hold our simple majority in the House, and add 2 senators in the Senate. That's a lot easier to do because now we're dealing with, a simple majority in the House and having 52 Democratic senators in the Senate. And I think that's more doable than somehow convincing like a 2/3 majority to support impeachment. Otherwise, we'll see another impeachment. I think that will just help in terms of pushing people away from this whole idea and saying, oh, it's another impeachment trial. Democrats impeach everybody. The Wisconsin primary is August 9th, so we don't know yet who the Democratic nominee is for Wisconsin, but in any case, they're going up against Ron Johnson, who is overwhelmingly unpopular. So I think he's actually underwater in his approval ratings in Wisconsin. So we can win in Wisconsin, we can win in Pennsylvania. Both of those Senate candidates that are on the Republican side are unpopular. Both of those states went for Democrats in the 2020 election. So it's not, what we're trying to do is not insurmountable. It's just repeating what just happened in November of 2020. What can be done about the Electoral College? The states are ratifying something called the the National Popular Vote Compact, and that would say that whoever wins the national popular vote, that's who the state's electoral votes would go to. So it would basically be a way to just completely undermine the Electoral College. So basically, for example, let's say California has 55 electoral votes. Let's say it was Biden versus Trump, and let's say Trump won nationally. He got more votes. One person, one vote. He got more of the popular vote than Biden did. If California signed that compact and it goes into law, and it's ratified, then all of California's 55 electoral votes go to Trump, even if Trump didn't win the state of California. This is important because it basically says that whoever wins the national popular vote is going to win, because it basically just makes the electoral votes it makes them go away as a system. So that system wouldn't exist anymore if that was the case, which I think is the right thing to do in a democracy, that we don't have this the ability for an electoral college to give all of this disproportionate power to small states, but B, kind of opens the door for states to completely abuse this system, and that's what we're seeing right now with all of this stuff. Okay, let me get ready to put this hearing on because we're about 10 minutes away. Okay. So again, we're about 10 minutes away from this committee hearing starting. See if we've got audio yet. We just have the light din of a committee hearing about to begin. So this will start in about 10 minutes. I'll use this time now to ask, before we go on, I'll answer some questions, but before you go on, if you can please subscribe to this channel so that you can get notifications for every time that I do these live streams for the January 6th committee. That would be helpful. It's free, doesn't cost you anything, but it would be the best way to support what I do. So if you're not yet subscribed, just hit the subscribe button. I would really appreciate that. And I promise I won't give you the whole spiel, the whole guilt trip on supporting progressive media and not letting the Ben Shapiros of the world win. Somebody had said we need a better way to track our ballot when we vote, some kind of barcode. A lot of states do have ballot tracking. I know California, a lot of states offer that, and I'm sure it'll get more popular as long as Democrats continue to get elected into office and our election systems become more secure by virtue of people who actually care about one's right to vote getting elected. We'll see more and more of that. Oh, somebody said, Fred asked, besides subscribe, what else can we do to support your work? Thank you for asking. Actually, the best way, the best way besides YouTube is I have a podcast called No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. It's on every podcast platform. If you could subscribe to that podcast, that is another great way. Also free. So I won't do anything where I ask for money. But I think just subscribing to the YouTube channel, and subscribing to my podcast would be super helpful. Again, the podcast is called No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. If you just type in my name in YouTube, it'll in podcast platform like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, that'll pop up as well. And I always have interviews on there that are not on YouTube. So a lot of my podcast stuff I do put online, but but there's always at least one interview that doesn't go onto YouTube. This week's podcast talks about the Roe decision. It talks about court expansion. I speak to John Lovett, who is Obama's speechwriter. We have a really fun conversation. And I speak with Annette Taddeo, who's running in Florida's 27th congressional district. That is the most flippable congressional district in the entire state of Florida. So these are the people who have these races that aren't, it's on Pandora, yes, for somebody just asking. These are the races that aren't as sexy because they're not like, it's not like Mitch McConnell versus, Mitch McConnell's up, but these are the races that are so immensely important for us to win if we want any chance of actually holding on to the House, so that we can pass the Women's Health Protection Act, for example, in the next term. So, I'm going to be speaking with a lot of these frontline Democrats, the people that we really have to focus on in terms of supporting in this next election if we want any hope of holding on to the House. And for a lot of these people, our money goes way farther because these are small districts. Oftentimes they're 1 or 2 term Congress people. You might not have heard of them, but their seats are going to be so instrumental in terms of holding the House. So again, the first one that I spoke with as part of this series, so to speak, is Annette Taddeo in Florida's 27th. That's Miami. Super important district, not just because right now it's a Biden +1 district, but also because it's 75% Hispanic. And so I speak with her on the podcast about what Democrats can do to hang on to Hispanic, to claw back the Hispanic vote, and also what she's doing specifically that kind of positions herself to best win this race. I mean, not only is she Hispanic, but she's also won her state Senate seat in that specific district. So, and she flipped that from a red seat to a blue seat. So she's uniquely qualified to be able to flip this seat. But I'm going to be speaking to a lot more of these Democrats as we get closer to midterms and kind of doing what I can to raise their profile and to help them. Okay, for people just tuning in, we are 5 minutes out from this committee hearing beginning. Most of my time spent right now is just trying to hide the sex spam bots in the chat. Trying to make this a better experience for people listening in the chat right now or following along in the chat right now. Of course, if you want to donate, people that are looking to donate, I also have the Don't Be a Mitch Fund. You can type in www.don'tbeamitch.com. Those donations are split among a number of voter registration groups. So we've raised about $970,000 for voter registration. I specifically focused on voter registration and not candidates, because candidates are going to be inherently problematic, especially before these primaries, because somebody might not want to support one person who's not progressive enough or somebody who's too progressive. So supporting the candidates prior to actually when they're actually chosen is going to be inherently problematic. I thought it'd be more important for the last year. I started this in June of 2021. It's June of 2022. For the last year to support voter registration groups, and these people have been working before the last year, knocking doors, getting people registered to vote. I thought that was the most important thing. I saw what Stacey Abrams did in Georgia. My goal has always been to replicate that. So I focused on a number of other states. That $970,000 has been split between voter registration groups in Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, Iowa, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, and I believe, in Wisconsin. So those are the states that are split between. I think there's 10 or 11 states in total. But if you want to donate to that, if you're looking for something to donate to, I would highly recommend that fund. It's called the Don't Be a Mitch Fund. You could type in don'tbeamitch.com. It'll bring you right to the Act Blue. And again, it's an Act Blue, so none of that money actually, I don't see any of it. It goes right to the organizations. I thought that's an important thing, is to make sure that when you're donating your money, that it's going directly to the organizations that need it, and that people aren't taking a cut of it for themselves. I was actually about to name that fund Whiny Little Mitch, but some of the organizations that I had included felt a little uneasy about how obvious that pun was, so I couldn't do Whiny Little Mitch. But I do have a shirt that says Whiny Little Mitch, and that's on my website. And if you buy shirts from my website about the Don't Be a Mitch Fund, all of that money, 100%, gets donated to the fund. I think I sold like maybe $10,000 worth of merch last year. All of it was donated right to the fund. So we're about 2 minutes away. 2 minutes away for people just joining in. Again, today's witness is going to be Cassidy Hutchinson. She's an aide to Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows. She's not a senior aide, but she was always in the room for every single meeting. So even though she wasn't senior staff level, she has, the insight of any senior staff level member. Thank you to people just tuning in. We are moments away from this committee starting. And as soon as the committee members come in, I'll switch to a bigger screen so you'll be able to see everything, you'll be able to hear everything. Again, this is a surprise hearing that was just called yesterday. So whatever it is that they've got, like, promises to be pretty compelling stuff for them to call for this in this unannounced surprise hearing. They weren't supposed to have another hearing until July. Okay, we are 1 minute away from the hearing beginning. Let's go to a bigger screen here. Somebody said, quit your mitching. That is so good. Bud Moore. Bud, please give me permission to print that on a shirt. Quit your mitching is great. I have a few shirts. I have one that says Whiny Little Mitch. I had Don't Be a Mitch. I have Bye Mitch, and Mitch Please. So if you want any of those shirts, they're on my website, briantylercohen.com/shop, and you can buy them there. Any Mitch apparel, any Mitch merch, all gets donated back to the voter registration fund. Okay. Mitch, don't kill my vibe. Oh, God. What a good one also. That's CB. Mitch, don't kill my vibe. I should have done like a group brainstorm before I started printing these shirts. Mitch slap. But I'll give you a free shirt. Just email me. Brian@briantylercohen.com. I feel like everybody can agree that Bud deserves it. Okay, we are moments away. The January 6th committee hearing is going to begin any second now. It is 10:01 Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, and here comes the January 6th committee. So this is going to start any second now. And again, for people just joining, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. And while they do this, my last appeal: if you're just joining, if you're not yet a subscriber on this channel, please throw me a subscribe. Best way to support me. I'll continue doing these live streams for the January 6th committee. But the best way to be alerted when I have them is to subscribe to my channel. So thank you in advance for subscribing. I really appreciate it. Doesn't just help me, it helps like progressive media. And I believe this is Cassidy Hutchinson. That's the witness. So I believe that's her. We'll get confirmation momentarily. Okay, a lot of information. When they said that this would be explosive enough to hold an unplanned hearing, yeah, they pretty much hit that nail on the head. Okay, so a lot that we have to go over. Before we jump into just a quick overview of what all of this means, I would just ask for people who've just joined in on this live stream, if you haven't yet subscribed, if you can please subscribe to my channel, that would be highly appreciated. Okay, just a few things I want to go over. First of all, this idea that White House counsel Pat Cipollone warned that Trump shouldn't go to the Capitol because, quote, "We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable, including obstructing justice or defrauding," she said, defrauding the electoral count. In other words, the White House knew, Trump knew, the legal exposure that they faced by virtue of going to the Capitol, and yet still, Trump tried as hard as he possibly could to get to the Capitol, to march there, to participate in an insurrection with these insurrectionists, to the point that, I mean, this was the wildest story I think I've ever heard. I tried to write down as much of it as I could, but Trump was so intent on going to the Capitol that when he told he would be returning to the White House, he, quote, had a very strong, very angry response. He said, "I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now." He then reached forward to grab the steering wheel. When he was stopped by a Secret Service agent, he lunged for his neck, came back in, found out that Bill Barr had done an interview with the AP where he admitted that there was no fraud. He was so angry about that he threw his lunch against the wall. And then, of course, we just heard Cassidy Hutchinson explain that this was not the only time that Trump had thrown his food or his dishes against the wall. A petulant child, a fucking child, this guy is. This is the guy who we're supposed to believe is like the peak of strength, that he throws his ketchup against the wall. He's a 9-year-old. But I think more importantly than the fact that he's a 9-year-old is the fact that he knew the legal exposure that they had. The White House knew the legal exposure that they had by virtue of going to the Capitol with these people who they themselves already knew were armed. For all these Republicans who claim that, these were unarmed, peaceful protesters, they had AR-15s, they had Glock-style pistols. We just heard the chatter from the I believe it was the Capitol Police, admitting that these weapons were present, that they saw AR-15s all through the Capitol walk between the rally and the U.S. Capitol. And to further underscore to the extent to which they not only knew about this violence but didn't care about it, Hutchinson testified that when she told Meadows about the Capitol actually being overrun, quote, he almost had a lack of reaction. They didn't care. The violence was the point. Any normal person, if you find out that there are AR-15s on your way to where you're going, you'd say, oh, maybe we shouldn't go there. Maybe we should do what we can to put an end to this. This was so unremarkable to Mark Meadows and this White House team that he didn't even look up from his phone when he was told by both Cassidy Hutchinson and Tony Ornato previously about the violence at the Capitol or the fact that these people were armed. They didn't care. The violence was the point. That was the goal for these people. Even Trump himself said, quote, "Take the effing mags away," the metal detectors. "They're not here to hurt me. Take the effing mags away, then we can march to the Capitol." Trump knew that these people were armed. He didn't care. He didn't even want the mags. He didn't even want the metal detectors. He wanted them to come in armed so that they and he could then march to the Capitol together. After he'd been told that these people had weapons, that they weren't even allowed to enter the ellipse, the rally, because they had weapons and they wouldn't get in. So he knew that these people were staying far away because they had their weapons. They wouldn't pass clearance to be at the rally to watch him speak. He didn't care. He didn't care because he knew that they weren't going to use those weapons to hurt him. Those weapons were for other people. But he knew. He was told numerous times, and that's the damning part about all of this. I mean, we can go over the extent to which Trump knew of all of this illegality. And we will go over the extent to which Trump knew about all this illegality. All the way from hearing number 1, where Alex Cannon and Bill Barr and even Ivanka Trump all testified that there was no fraud and that Trump knew the truth and yet opted to move forward with this scheme, this election theft scheme anyway. All the way to right now, where he was even notified that there were weapons, to the point where they wouldn't even be able to get in to hear his speech at the ellipse at the rally. He knew that there were weapons, said, "I didn't care, take the mags away, they're not here to hurt me," suggesting that he clearly knew that they were there to hurt somebody. I mean, weapons aren't flowers, right? Weapons are there to hurt somebody. "They're not here to hurt me, take the mags away, and then I can march with them to the Capitol." He wanted to join the insurrectionists as they were pursuing their insurrection at the U.S. Capitol with their weapons, with their gallows to hang Mike Pence. The extent to which these people knew to which these people all in the White House knew exactly what was going on can't be understated. Trump knew exactly what he was doing. All of his quotes that day in this testimony reveal that. And by the way, I know that the judiciary, the Republicans' judiciary count, clearly run by Jim Jordan, said, "LOL, no one is watching this." I have more live viewers on my live stream now than in any of the other 5 hearings. People are watching this. And the reason that they're so hell-bent on trying to will into existence this idea that no one's watching is because this is so incredibly damning for them. Not only the fact that they all knew what was going on. They all know the truth about fraud in this election. They all knew the truth about there being no path to victory. They all knew the truth, these Republican congressmen, about the fact that this whole scheme was illegal because they then followed that up by asking for a presidential pardon. Every single element of this is bad for them. House Judiciary. No one, LOL, no one is watching this. Americans are wondering where the hearing is on $5 gas. Yeah, I'm sure people watching this are wondering about gas. Although the better question would be, why did Republicans vote against any and all measures to actually bring the prices of gas down? All of the Republicans, save 1 or 2, voted against the measure to stop price gouging at the pump. And then they turn around and say, why is there $5 gas? Also, about a month or 2 ago, they were saying, stop coddling Putin. Why don't you cut off Russian oil imports? We cut off Russian oil imports. As does a lot of other countries in the world. Oil is traded on the global market. The price goes up because the supply goes down, and then we have $5 gas. And then those same people who are saying ban Russian imports of oil are saying, hey, wait, why do we have $5 gas? Gas. So anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that. It's just bad faith all around. But in any case, everything that we've heard from this committee today. Probably some of the most striking testimony in any of the 5 hearings. Again, Trump had been so hell-bent on making sure that he could march with the insurrectionists to the U.S. Capitol, even though he knew these people were armed. These people had AR-15s, they had Glock-style pistols. He tried to get the Secret Service not to make sure that any rally goers went through magnometers, metal detectors, because he knew that he wasn't in danger by virtue of these people having weapons. He didn't care. He knew that all of these people with guns and semi-automatic weapons were not there to shoot him. They were there to shoot somebody else. He goes, quote, "They're not here to hurt me." What does that tell you? If they're not there to hurt him, but they have these AR-15s and these Glock-style pistols, what are they there to do? Who are they there to hurt? He knew full well, because he's not a dummy. He's corrupt, but he's not a dummy. He knew exactly what he was doing. And he was trying to bolster what these people were doing, to validate what these people were trying to do by virtue of walking with them to the Capitol, where they would go on to try to assassinate the vice president, assassinate the Democratic Speaker of the House. We learned last time that these insurrectionists were like 40 feet away from Mike Pence. At which point, Trump tweeted how displeased he was that Pence didn't unilaterally overturn the election for Donald Trump. At the moment that they knew that there were insurrectionists 40 feet away, he threw all that gas on the fire and tweeted about how Pence was unilaterally responsible for not carrying out this scheme, this illegal, unconstitutional scheme. I mean, pretty remarkable stuff. Only to have the cherry on top, which shows that Trump was so angry that Bill Barr had done an interview, I believe with the AP, saying that there was no election fraud, admitting that there was no election fraud, to the point that he threw his lunch against the wall. Because his only goal in this was to feed the narrative that there was fraud, even though he knew it was a false narrative, even though we already have taped sworn deposition from Bill Barr himself admitting that he told Trump that there was no fraud and that Trump was so livid that he just sought to ignore it. Because it wasn't about the truth, it was about lying to these people to feed the narrative so that they could then march on the Capitol and carry out this coup that they sought to carry out. This was all on purpose. And so, if anything, that is evidence of corrupt intent. Because Trump carried all of this out knowing, after having been told, and we know they were told because they testified to this under oath, that there was no fraud, that there was no path to victory for him, he sought to do it anyway. Because the goal wasn't to find fraud, it was to defraud people and obstruct a congressional proceeding. So look, I'll be a broken record here. I know the DOJ is watching. I know Merrick Garland is watching. I know these investigations are unfolding concurrently. I know they're sharing information and that they're sharing witness testimony and documents. But watching this stuff is so important because so many people knowing what happened on that day in public allows us to ratchet up this pressure on the DOJ to do something about this. We'll continue having these hearings. We'll continue finding out more information about what Trump knew and how he sought to lie in public anyway. But I think it's so important because the more people that recognize that Trump not only lied, but he did so with corrupt intent, the more pressure is put on the DOJ to actually do something about this. That's why this committee is so important, because all of this would be happening behind the scenes. Then it's up to like a few prosecutors, ultimately Merrick Garland, just to decide what to do or if the case is strong enough. But now, when the entire country is watching this stuff, when I have more people watching this stream than any of the other 5 streams, just a microcosm of how much people are continuing to stay engaged in this stuff, I think that really allows like this pressure to build. And I spoke with Glenn Kirshner, a former federal prosecutor, a few weeks ago, and he said pressure like this bursts pipes. Don't think that the DOJ doesn't feel this. Don't think that Merrick Garland doesn't feel this. Every time one of these committee hearings happen, and it is the top story in the news, everyone is watching this. More people are watching this than World Series games. Don't think that they don't see that and that isn't felt. Okay, it looks like the committee is coming back in. Before we jump back in, I would just ask one more time, if you haven't subscribed to my channel and you enjoy my commentary or my other regular videos that I do, please subscribe to this channel. It's free, doesn't cost you anything, and it would help me out a lot. That's the best way to support what I do, is to subscribe. So thank you for subscribing. Wow. Okay. Probably the most explosive day of testimony that we've seen so far. I don't even know where we begin with all of this stuff. I just want to recount what I think some of the most important points are in all of this, starting with, I think, one of the most explosive parts of the whole thing, which is that both Rudy Giuliani and Mark Meadows both sought a presidential pardon from Trump. If you needed, I mean, this is, and by the way, this is an aide to Mark Meadows, who's been, ostensibly loyal to Mark Meadows for the entirety of their time working together, who came to admit, to do her part in all of this, and admitted that her own boss had sought a presidential pardon. So that is pretty wild news. Also, evidence of consciousness of guilt that these people would seek presidential pardons because, again, for the umpteenth time, they knew what they were doing was illegal, that it was unconstitutional. They knew the truth because they'd been told the truth by people like Bill Barr, Alex Cannon, Hirschman. Even Ivanka Trump admitted that there was no fraud, and yet they pushed forward with these lies and these attempts to undermine the election results. Even with Eastman's plan that Mike Pence would be able to unilaterally overturn the election results or refuse to certify the electoral count. All of this was done knowing. That's what's most striking in all of this. Every single hearing, we find out what the illegal activity was. In Eastman's case, it was creating this plan, this unconstitutional plan, where Pence would be able to unilaterally decide whether or not he certified the election results. And we also have evidence behind the scenes where they themselves admit that what they were doing is unconstitutional. And so this was no different. We have an aide to Mark Meadows who kind of recounts every moment of that day of January 6th and the extent to which these people were armed, the extent to which these people were seeking to march to the Capitol, the far-right militia groups that were involved, and he didn't care because he knew that this violence was occurring. He knew that the goal was for this violence to occur. He was completely nonplussed about it. And at the end of all this, while he was, in that camp, like Hutchinson was explaining, where they were trying to deflect on behalf of Trump, at the same time, he requested a presidential pardon because he knew that everything he was advocating for was illegal. I think it's worth noting too that, and this doesn't have anything to do with the legal elements of this and whatnot, but I think it's important too to note that what Cassidy Hutchinson has done is basically made herself a pariah in the Republican Party, and the committee itself explained how she'd be facing death threats because of this, and it's true. And I mean, we heard about violence aimed toward Lady Ruby and Shay Moss in previous hearings. I believe that was 1 week ago today on last Tuesday's hearing. And these people will use this political violence as a tool to achieve their political ends. And so I think that that's especially important. It's what happened in the events leading up to January 6th, and it's what continues to happen now. And I have no doubt that you'll have the Steve Bannons of the world and the Rudy Giulianis of the world work overtime to defame this woman who came forward and testified under oath because, because she committed the crime of not going ahead with this illegal scheme to overturn the election results of the United States of America. Just wild. So just want to cover a few of what I think were the most striking points in all of this. Again, first, both Giuliani and Mark Meadows sought a presidential pardon from Trump. Again, that is as clear an admission of consciousness of guilt as you'll ever get. We also have, at the very end, we were let known about the fact that the January 6th committee has evidence that Trump-aligned figures were attempting to influence witnesses ahead of their depositions. I mean, just straight gangster stuff. Just like, hey, Trump reads these, and he's watching, and we hope you stay loyal, and good luck. have a good time. Like, just straight gangster stuff. Written in writing. I mean, they got these messages from these people. No shame. You know, the dichotomy between their danger and their intelligence is like you can fit the Titanic between those things, but that doesn't change the fact that, you know, if these people were being dangerous, they were attempting to influence witnesses, they were doing whatever they can to protect these people who, again, sought to overturn the election on Trump's behalf. One other thing that I thought was striking was we found out today that Trump was aware of the hang Mike Pence chance. So when Cassidy Hutchinson handed, I believe it was Jim Jordan was on the phone for Mark Meadows. She handed that phone call. Mark Meadows took that call with the door open, I believe, into the Oval Office, and Cassidy Hutchinson heard Trump and other figures, Trump world figures, talking in that Oval Office about the hang Mike Pence chance, which means that Trump knew that the crowd of insurrectionists was looking to assassinate him, which makes it all the more damning when Trump then went out and sent out those texts blaming Mike Pence and pouring fuel on the fire for not, you know, going along with what he claimed was his duty, his obligation to refuse to certify the electoral votes. So Trump knew that people were looking to kill him, and instead of tamping down the situation, instead of bringing the temperature down, Trump started sending out sending out tweets that were pinning the blame on Mike Pence and just ramping up the pressure on him. Which, by the way, just as an aside, makes it all the more ridiculous that Mike Pence still to this day doesn't have the courage to come forward and speak an ill word of Donald Trump. And half of that I blame on Mike Pence just being chicken shit, right? There's no way around that. He is just chicken shit. If this girl, Cassidy Hutchinson, this young girl, can come forward and complete this testimony publicly, and yet Mike Pence, the former vice president of the United States, doesn't have the balls to do that, then, like, come on. Just the peak of fecklessness, spinelessness. He is a chicken shit through and through, full stop. It's half that. It's also half the fact that, you know, this is what the Republican Party has devolved into. That even when your own party has tried to have you killed, still, it's such a cult of personality that you can't do anything about it. You can't speak ill of any of these people. You can't go against anything they've said. You can't publicly speak out. This is like, they'll crow about how the Republican Party is the party of Lincoln and, like, courage and democracy and the Constitution. This is a reality TV host who tried to overthrow the U.S. government, who can't even get a single sentence out of his mouth without stumbling over, you know, his glaring lack of vocabulary or intelligence. And yet, even Mike Pence, who's been in politics forever, guy who is the vice president of the United States, who could be at the end of his political career, it's not like he's at the beginning of his political career, can't even bring himself to speak one ill word of Donald Trump. And that goes for most of these people. I mean, yes, there are people like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger who are doing this work, and it is, you know, courageous of them to do that, but both of them are going to lose their jobs. And so I think that's kind of a testament to what the Republican Party has become, that if you do deign to speak out against the most blatantly unconstitutional and illegal scheme in American history, that the party will abandon you in deference to the guy who committed, incited, inspired that scheme in the first place. The likelihood that Liz Cheney wins in Wyoming is slim. I believe Adam Kinzinger has already announced his retirement anyway, so just goes to show you what happens, like, if you speak out against the mob boss in this party. And I use mob boss purposefully because these people were also seeking to, you know, tamper with witnesses before they went in, just dangling little warnings, little threats wrapped as warnings, or threats wrapped as, like, hey, we know you're loyal, right? So that's Mike Pence and the Republican Party. I think one more point that was especially galling. In his testimony, in his taped depositions, Liz Cheney asked Mike Flynn, who I believe is like a 3-star general, do you believe in the peaceful transition of power in the United States of America? He said the fifth. He was asked if he believes in the, not even in this instance, just as a general rule, do you believe in the peaceful transition of power in the United States of America? He pled the fifth. If you needed an example of the Republican Party's refusal to embrace our institutions, democracy as a whole, the Constitution, it is the fact that this guy, under oath, couldn't bring himself to say that he believes in the peaceful transition of power in the United States of America. He doesn't believe in it. He doesn't think we should do it. That is insane to me. That is insane to me. And I think it betrays their entire worldview. Like, not for nothing, but if you can't just admit that you think peaceful transfer of power is an okay thing, that you just generally, in theory, agree with it, then that shows like where you stand on the scale of democracy versus doing whatever you can to install an authoritarian, a dictator, a Christo-fascist, totalitarian ruler. That is the most insane part about this Michael Flynn testimony. He also obviously couldn't even answer whether violence was justified. He pleaded the fifth as to whether the violence was justified. And again, you don't plead the fifth if the answer is no, it wasn't justified, violence is never justified, or no, of course I don't disagree with the notion that there should be a peaceful transition of power in the United States of America. Those seem like pretty easy things on their face, pretty unremarkable things on their face to say you agree with. The fact that he wasn't willing to say outright whether he agreed with those things, whether the violence was justified, pretty much betrays exactly where he stands. And it betrays where the Republican Party is these days right now, in the sense that, again, and I repeated, I mentioned this in the previous break, Republicans are willing to use political violence as a tool to achieve whatever partisan political ends they're trying to achieve. They did it in the lead up to the election. They did it when they defamed people like those witnesses we heard last week, Lady Ruby and Shay Moss, where they, I believe, Shay Moss had handed her mom a ginger mint, and you have all these Republican operatives claiming that they're passing USB drives with nefarious illegal votes that they were going to plug into computers and turn the results of the election. They were handing each other mints, ginger mints. They will destroy their lives to the point where they had to leave their houses because they didn't feel safe in their homes because all their information had gotten out. God knows what's going to happen to this girl, Cassidy Hutchinson, for committing the crime of telling the truth under oath. So we've heard of all this political violence before. Obviously, January 6th was the peak of that, and they'll continue to use political violence as a means to achieve their ends. And so, that's where the Republican Party is right now, and I think that underscores the importance, even if you are not inherently political. If you think that political violence should be a tool in the United States to achieve your political ends, then the Republican Party is for you. But if you don't, if you're one of those people who I assume the vast majority of Americans are, then even if you agree with the Republicans' agenda, even if you don't think the Democrats are doing enough right now to confront the issues facing us, this is a foundational issue. Do we want to live in a country where you can commit violence to get what you want politically or not? And so, gas prices and inflation aside, more broadly, if you think you should be able to incite coups, insurrections on the seat of government, then you have one party advocating for that. If you don't, if you think that the democratic process won't survive with that kind of thing, then you have an obligation to support Democrats because they are the only ones right now fighting against the Republicans to stop this. That's why I don't get, we had someone like, I forgot that witness's name, the House Speaker in Arizona. He explained how, he wasn't willing to create this call into session Trump's fraud claims so they could discuss it further. Bowers, thank you, Rusty Bowers. I appreciate you guys letting me know. he would go to the ends of the earth and defend the Constitution, and he wouldn't move forward with Trump's fraud claims and call a special session. And yet, when they asked him later, would you vote for Donald Trump? He said yeah. He said, yeah. These people aren't going to save you. You can't look, even if you're a Republican, you can't look at the Adam Kinzingers and Liz Cheneys and be like, this is the answer to this, because it's not. Any votes for Republicans are validations of the Republicans' strategy more broadly. And so I think when you have, when you have people who are independents, who are Republicans, or even Democrats who don't feel inspired to turn out right now, and I get it, trust me. If there's anybody who feels like Democrats aren't doing enough to meet the moment right now, it's me. But we have a binary choice right now, and that is between a Republican Party who, even while admitting in these testimonies, almost to the point of tears, that what Donald Trump did was so unconstitutional, so antithetical to what this entire country stands for, they'd still vote for him. If that doesn't betray right there exactly what these people stand for, which is not much, then nothing will. So that's where we stand right now. Just want to take a quick moment. I think I'm going to end it here. If I would just ask, if you enjoyed this lead up into this January 6th hearing and kind of the wrap up at the end, and you want to hear more, I'll do live streams for every hearing moving forward, just like I've done for the last 5 of them before this. If you could please subscribe to my channel, it is free. And more broadly, please subscribe to other progressive media channels. I think it's important that our ecosystem is bolstered, because right now the right wing owns social media. They own it on YouTube. They really own it on Facebook. I can't even begin to try to get a foothold on Facebook. It's exceedingly hard for any progressive or Democrat or left of center personality to try to break through Facebook. Facebook does everything it can to undermine voices from the left. But anyway, do what you can to support progressive media. If you can subscribe to this channel, subscribe to other progressive channels, it really helps the ecosystem as a whole. And when people come on looking to find some information, people who aren't political, and they want to find out what happened today, and they come onto YouTube, they're either going to get directed toward the Ben Shapiros of the world, or they're going to get directed toward the people on the left. And I think, where I stand is I would much rather have them get that information from those of us on the left, especially when we know that the right was so heavily involved in all of this stuff. I mean, even we saw those texts from Mark Meadows from Fox News personalities like Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity, where even the people giving the news are the ones directing Donald Trump in terms of what he should do to be more successful in his efforts to, overturn the election results and how to do PR afterwards. I mean, those don't seem like the people we should be getting our news from. So in any case, appreciate the subscribes. I believe that the next January 6th committee hearing won't be until July, so which is only in a few days. But hopefully we hear something again soon. As soon as we have more information, I'll post in the community tab and create a video here that you can click notify me on so that you know exactly when these committee hearings are starting. So I think that's all. I'm going to stay for one quick sec in case anybody has questions that I can answer. Figure while people are watching, if there's more questions that I can answer, if something is burning, just let me know. Somebody said, do a sit down with your lawyer friend ASAP. I think that's in reference to Glenn Kirshner, and I will definitely get Glenn Kirshner on, and I want to discuss this whole world of pardons with him. I think that would be really interesting, so stand by, because we are going to go, I'll definitely have Glenn Kirshner. So if you want to hear an interview with Glenn Kirshner, 30-year former federal prosecutor, subscribe to this channel, because that will be very soon. I promise you that. Will Cassidy have security? I believe that she will. I cannot imagine a world in which she doesn't have security. The question is, how long do you have this security? How long are you subjected to looking over your shoulder? I know that when we heard from Shamos and Lady Ruby a week ago, it's kind of upended their lives, and their lives still haven't gone back to normal. Lady Ruby said she used to say her name out loud. She's afraid that when people acknowledge her, that that it'll incite some type of violence, and so she doesn't like when people say her name anymore. This is a testament to the fact that these people rely on violence to achieve their political ends. How do we get Republicans to watch and discuss reality? I think that the important thing here is, to keep paying attention to these hearings, even if it's not Republicans. A lot of what this has to do with is showing Democrats, showing independents, showing all the people who came out and voted in 2020 the importance of voting again and just understanding what's at stake here. If the same amount of people who voted in 2020 voted in 2022, we would win no problem, because Democrats won nearly across the board. So I think in terms of, getting Republicans, I have no doubt that some Republicans are going to hear this stuff just by virtue of it being in the news. And that's what you can hope for, especially when the margins are so thin in states like Wisconsin, for example. Biden won the state of Wisconsin by 3 votes per precinct. So when the margins are that small, even just holding these hearings and making sure that people are paying attention, and they are paying attention, by the way, is important, because that increases the likelihood of just some of these people, a few of these people, 1 or 2% of these people recognizing, okay, there's a lot of Republican witnesses, there's a lot of evidence, there's a lot of testimony and sworn deposition, a lot of Trump world figures. We have Bill Barr, we have Ivanka, we have Alex Cannon, we have Hirschman. All of these people are admitting that maybe what I'm hearing from the Trump folks isn't true. And so even if it's just like 1 or 2%, that is enough to push people in these elections to recognize that, like, okay, this is what the truth is, this is what the truth isn't. And so I think like those margins will matter. If you missed any of this, by the way, this video will be on my channel under the live streams playlist. Who called to intimidate the witnesses? We don't know yet. We know that there were texts or messages sent to these people, but we don't know who actually sent them. That we'll find out, I believe, in subsequent hearings. If Trump is prosecuted, what influence will his appointed Supreme Court justices have, if any? So I believe if Trump is prosecuted, it'll be in a jury. It'll be in a jury trial, so the Supreme Court wouldn't have any say over what can happen, because if somebody is convicted in a jury trial, the Supreme Court doesn't have any say over that. Again, that's something that I'll clarify when I do interviews with federal prosecutors. I'll be able to get that information, no problem. And by the way, I know that people are paying attention because somebody just let me know that 188,000 people watched on the PBS stream earlier. 188,000 people. I had, I think, roughly between 155 and 200,000 on this stream. That number will continue to go up as people catch these hearings later. And they're watching on a number of other channels that I saw streaming while I was streaming. And of course, we usually get into the tens of millions of people actually watching through their Nielsen ratings, through their TVs. So people are paying attention. I think that's exactly what needs to happen. If we can pick off a few Republicans who are willing to admit, who are willing to acknowledge objective reality, that's important, especially in an environment where just 1 or 2% of people flipping is so important, so significant, has such great impacts. And then, of course, you have independents who are the people who go from Obama to Trump to Biden. I mean, those are the people that we have to reach as well. And lastly, and something that, I try to do, that's something that's important to me, is like inspiring turnout among Democrats, because I know that, when Trump is in office, it's one thing, and people are amped up because we hear the Trump bullshit every single day, and even if you're not political, it inspires you to turn out to vote. And then when Biden's in office, it's a little more boring, and it's not all about the Trump show every single day, and so people kind of lose that enthusiasm to go and vote, right? I think that it's important to show that, like, even though Trump isn't on the ballot, everything that we do right now is going to be so important in terms of what happens in 2024, especially keeping Congress in Democratic control so that they can't do exactly what they tried to do in 2020, again, if and when Trump runs in 2024. And also, B, look at the issues that are facing us right now with climate change, with women's reproductive rights, with gun safety. None of that's going to change if people don't turn out and allow Republicans to just run roughshod over Democrats in terms of the legislation that they're looking to pass. If you think that the Supreme Court overruling Roe is bad enough unto itself, just imagine when we get just like we're seeing in the States, these blanket abortion bans nationwide. That is the natural progression of what we're seeing in the Supreme Court right now. So if that's important to you, then I hope that bolsters turnout, even among Democrats. And look, people that are watching this, I've polled my chat before. I know that roughly a quarter of people watching are from swing states. So they're from Florida, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Ohio, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin. And if you live in one of those states, or you have friends or family in one of those states, or you have somebody connected to you who's not political or sees themselves as more in the middle, explain to them the stakes and do your part to get like 1 or 2 people registered and persuaded to vote. That's it. And again, I explained this a few minutes ago, but if you don't think that persuading 1 or 2 people will have an impact, remember, in Wisconsin, Biden won by 3 votes per precinct. If 3 votes per precinct were flipped, Trump would have won the state of Wisconsin. So just a few votes, a few people persuaded. And I know we have them. I have them in my own family. And if you think that because what I do, I'm able to persuade everybody, it doesn't work like that. I do my best, but like we all have people in our lives who haven't voted before, who aren't political, who don't care, who think the whole system is corrupt. I get it. But the stakes are really high right now. And what we're facing with, what we're being faced with is not only these attacks on our democracy that we've learned about from these January 6th hearings, but even less esoterically, these attacks on women's reproductive rights, on abortion rights, on, guns being flooded into the streets of states that have refused to allow concealed carry permits to be issued. So all of this stuff is stuff that touches our lives. It's not so vague and like theoretical political stuff. It's not just like, inflation and migrant caravans. Like, this is stuff that we feel. People are afraid to go to school and out in public because gun violence runs so rampant these days. People are afraid to deal with the whole issue of abortion because they don't know whether they're going to be able to get care. So this is only going to get worse. So I hope people recognize that and recognize the importance of not only staying engaged and voting themselves, but taking care of your circle. And that's the most important thing. Even with what I do, like I reach a lot of people every month. The most valuable thing to me is when I get emails saying I haven't voted before, I wasn't registered to vote, I've registered to vote now, and I voted in this last election, or I'm going to vote in this next election. Those are the things that mean the most. If I reach 20 million people a month, it is those 3 emails that I get from people that mean the most. So, everybody can do that in their own circles, and it makes a huge difference. So, with that said, I'll leave it at that. Again, one last note, if you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, please subscribe, it's free. And if you want to listen to my podcast, check out No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. It's on Google Podcasts, Apple, Spotify, every single podcast platform. That's a great way to support my work too. That's also free. So definitely check those out. Those are great ways to help me. I'll leave it there, and hope to see you for this next January 6th committee hearing at some point in July. Thank you so much.